or run around or say they have no money, and then other funds are being pinched to try and support those. There has to be a different way to make this. It has to be transparent and it has to be equitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Kat. Okay.
Thank you for having me today. David Lynn. I am a candidate for Portland City Council, District 1 in East Portland. I'm also an elected school board member for the Centennial School Board, as well as a president of the Centennial Community Association. Now, it's been over a year since our community passed a resolution in support of Portland Street Response, in support of lifting the restrictions, in support of expanding the staffing so that it could meaningfully expand citywide, so that it could be good 24/7. We continue to feel that way. We have a lot of people in our community, just because it's past 205 doesn't mean we don't have people experiencing mental health crises. And we are going to continue to fight for supporting Portland Street Response, supporting their funding and expansion, again, so that it's meaningfully citywide. We would like to, again, lift the restrictions. Hopefully they can go wherever they feel safe to go. And we want to support them in the next budget and make sure that they get the expansion so that we can qualify for federal funding, especially. And we definitely do not want it expanded to Multnomah County, where it can be further like left in limbo and not targeted to the communities where we really need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings, I am Dean Salazar, a candidate for Portland City Council. I also serve on the Oregon Autism Commission, the Children's Living Community Advisory Council, and the Governor's Child Foster Care Advisory Commission. So let me tell you about some of the reasons we are having these crises on the streets in the first place. So first off, we have, for many foster youth, 20% of them end up being abused in some purpose in the foster care system. And we also have them being thrown out on the streets when they go turn 18 or of the age that they decide that they just don't want to keep basically, providing services for them. And not only that, but we're also keeping them in hotels. We've been doing that for several years now. And so that itself is a problem. But then you also have stuff where there's just not a lot of mental health support for a lot of people with autism. And let me tell you that 30 to 40% of the national homeless rate has some form of IDD. And I guarantee you that because of the programs and systems we've used here in Oregon, that it's even higher. And as proof of that, let's look at the stabilization and crisis unit for an example. So in order to do that, you have to basically have the person volunteer to do that, the person with autism or the person with a developmental disability. But the problem there lies within that some of them sometimes aren't able to make those decisions within a sound mind. And so that often results in them not being given the support that they need. And if you want to know why so many, as well as many autistic people and people in the neurodivergent community lean so anti-cop, unfortunately, as well as are struggling with mental health, as we are seeing a national and global mental health crisis, these are parts of the reason why. You have to look under the hood at the architecture governing how we treat mental health, and we need to completely reform it. And I believe that PSR should be adding autism specialists to deal with people with autism for behavioral health needs. And I think we need to do that for the behavioral health unit for the Portland Police as well, and other stuff like that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is John Middleton. I'm a city councilor candidate in D2. I do support Friends of PSR, much like Jennifer Park said. I will reiterate that and some. I appreciate the framing questions. My question is, why are we not thinking bigger, or are we? And if so, can we expand on that? I don't think that any of the current crop of city councilors running for 2025 will ever let this program die. Also, I have yet to see an instance where armed response is appropriate outside of a violent situation, i.e. school shootings, i.e. stabbings, things of those nature. I've yet to see real statistics or any actual evidentiary proof of police preventing crime. They do a really, really good job of showing up afterwards. So I feel like something like Portland Police Response would actually be the first tier of our public safety. And we need to work down from that. So if a situation can't be de-escalated, then we can send something. Clearly, a fire can't be de-escalated. Let's send the fire department. Clearly, an active shooter cannot be de-escalated verbally. So that's when we need someone like police. I do think that police are kind of overworked and underpaid because we ask them to do everything and they're wholly inefficient at it. So let's make them good at what they do, and that's show up and be tough. So let's have a small armed rapid response team, and we'll take the rest of those people. Let's train people. Let's hire people from HBCUs, bring them to Portland, beef up our mental health, our autism, all of the health that we need. And let's start there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, my name is Chris Olson. I'm candidate for Portland City Council in District 2. Today, first of all, I must say fully +1, as Jennifer said, on everything that Friends of PSR supports. I'm with them on that. But today I want to speak on not just my behalf, but behalf of thousands of people. I recently, if you're familiar with the story of David Dino Bentley, who was killed not too far from here, and he was run over, a houseless man who, lived his life on the streets, said he didn't want to die out on the streets, and he ended up doing that anyway. And it's an incredibly sad story I'm sure you're all familiar with. I released a video on TikTok and Instagram from that, and it has thousands of views, tens of thousands of views, thousands of likes, and hundreds of comments of people saying we need a better response than what we have. So I'm not here just representing myself, but I'm here representing all of those people who are in my comments telling me that we need to do better. And so I'm calling on you, and I'm calling on the city to do better. People want to be invested in, not punished. Okay. And we need to change how our funding structure works so that PSR is fully funded. $4 million is a joke. Okay. We need way more money than that for the Portland Street Response. And that's available, and we can get that. So I'm just letting you know that there are hundreds of thousands of people who are in support of fully funding the Portland Street Response, making it 24/7, and having a better, more ethical response to our mental health and housing crisis.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carly Laney, and I'm here as a community member, as well as a former Portland Street Response employee. I was a community health worker with the aftercare team, and I am fully supportive of Friends of PSR, and I came to PSR from the county. I have 23 years of experience working street outreach, case management, working with our most vulnerable people who have comorbidities, including houselessness. And so I was so excited to be at PSR, and unfortunately, I had to resign for my own mental health because I don't know if PSR should be housed within Portland Fire. The culture didn't really mesh well, and when there's management telling a peer support specialist or community health worker to no longer pick up food boxes for their clients, that does not sit well with my values, and on and on and on and on. And so some of the things that I thought could support the program, really utilizing those Medicaid dollars that could support PSR with the mental health crisis responders 1 and 2, really being a trauma-informed organization, and really looking into what that means for Portland Street Response as a crisis mobile outreach team, collaborate with community partners, people that are like the frequent user system, Fuse, with maybe Metro could support PSR in some way. Like I would really encourage PSR, Portland Fire to have communication, collaboration, and some transparency. What else was there? Yeah, just an advisory board maybe for PSR, and as well as obviously stable funding, like I mentioned. And I'm glad that we were able to have this here today, and I'm grateful that PSR exists, and the staff that are there are very solid, and they love the work that they do, and I want to continue to see them do that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Mark Benziger. I'm not running for council. It sounds really hard. No. So there were some great suggestions given by a gentleman who was here. I think the third person who spoke on the union. I want to sort of thumbs up. I had a list of things I wanted to say. I was like, well, no, you said it all. But so there's only two things I want to get to. One is lived in Portland for 15 years, but I've also lived overseas for 10 years. I've worked with a lot of foreign military and law enforcement, and the structure of law enforcement overseas is so dramatically different from the United States. And if you're not taking lessons from outside the US, you're missing huge opportunities. It's not just armed police and psychological support, street response. It's armed police, it's unarmed police, it's police without arrest authority, it's police with limited citation authority. There's a tiering of response that can be far more effective than either gun or no gun. And that gives you so much more flexibility to get inside buildings, get to places and do things. And so if you haven't already looked at some of the foreign law enforcement organizations, strongly recommend it. Second thing was really about the last point you raised, which was what do you want to ask the city council, which is get data on not just what's being spent individually on each call, but what are the outcomes, both in terms of mental health, survivability, long-term, equity, all those things, and also with an eye to the total cost. If 1% of your police response results in a lawsuit that costs the city $1 million, that's a cost. Figure out what those costs are and make sure that you're identifying how effective PSR is in comparison to law enforcement and what the cost is to the city and the people.
Thank you.
My name is Brandon Farley, and I just have 4 words. Defund Portland street response.
Okay, we have no more comments online at this time, so we'll keep going with in person.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm Debbie Kitchen. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a city council candidate for District 2. I fully support Friends of Portland Street Response, feel that Portland Street Response should be fully funded for 24/7 operations. In terms of the framing questions that you had, I would see Portland Street Response as a standalone bureau side by side with fire and police response, and all under the net of public safety, so that it has to work with all the other bureaus. And we should be striving for a system where these are not bureaus that are opposed or fighting against each other, that we are actually working together in a cohesive response to public service or public safety concerns in our community. So that's how I would envision it. I also think that as I own a small business, and we've had situations where somebody entered our business and it was difficult to ask them to leave, and they were having a mental health crisis, and then they went up on our roof and were jumping from roof to roof for several adjacent buildings. It was really scary. We didn't know what to do. And we do need sometimes where for Portland, somebody like Portland Street Response to be able to enter the building. And I think you could set up, at least for commercial buildings, you could set up a liability release or a form or something that would be signed by the building manager that could allow for that kind of entry. So I think that should be explored. And thank you for the opportunity and thank you for having this. And I will definitely be following up on the budget questions. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a comment from virtual. Go ahead, Anne.
Hello, my name is Ann Casper, and I was actually on the planning committee at the Portland Street Response. And I was very surprised that there was nobody there who was a peer, somebody had more mental health experience. So it started off really as more coming from the homeless advocates, homeless things, and our voices were not included. And at the end of the summer for the planning, they were going to have a peer support specialist and an EMT. 3 days before it went to City Hall, that got taken out. I think what would help Portland Street Response work actually is number one, you get an outside data source, research study out from not Portland State, from an outside place that wasn't involved in the funding and making it. And get a real study, as people are talking about the what works, what doesn't work, and ask the people themselves, did it work for them? Did these services work? I've heard on the ground not so good stories of people didn't follow through, or the aftercare didn't work, or no one called them afterwards. So let's find out about that and how we can improve it. Quality assurance, how do we make sure the quality is good? Let's use empowering language like frequent users and unwanted people that they have used in Portland Street Sport doesn't work for humans very well. And where are the people with mental health issues and the peer communities involved in the planning of this? I don't see anybody here speaking up for it. We should be all working together. When we work together, we find solutions that work. And I would also like to see the community, the peer support specialists paid the same as the community health workers, so $40,000 less. It doesn't make sense that somebody with a mental health experience would be paid a lot less than somebody who doesn't have the outward experience and training. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne. And we have no more, right? Okay, we're going to move back to in-person. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Drew Grabham. You use he, him pronouns. I'm actually the director of street outreach for Central City Concern. And I'm here to offer my personal support, but also Central City's thanks to PSR for showing up when we need them. I think it would be a tragedy if we defunded them and pulled back this absolutely vital, needed community resource in our time. Our behavioral health system really is trying to rebuild it. And this is one of the reliable sources that my street outreach teams rely on to partner with, collaborate, figure out how we can actually make some pathways moving forward. So I just really appreciate PSR. I think it would be a tragedy to lose them at this time. And I do like this idea of this additional funding and blended funding, and looking at just not having it be so susceptible to one organization or one commissioner's risk of pulling it all out. That's not a way to fund a system of care, especially for folks that this happens repeatedly to. They get made promises from the city, promises from social workers, everyone else. We're going to be there. What we need to do is just commit to this and then have it exist and not have the staff worry about whether they're going to show up. And then to Carly's point, we need to really make sure that PSR, that we're resourcing it well so that the volunteers and the staff there can be well. This work is hard. I support my team every day, and we really need to give them space to talk about witnessing all these systemic failures that they see and how to really be successful with them. So investing in actually the staff there and their wellness is an important part of making this sustainable. Thanks.
Thank you. You're next.
My name is Barb Reinish. I use she, her pronouns. I have often billed myself as a PSUP groupie. I'm not a member, but I've been hanging out with them for a while. And as far as Portland Street Response goes, I was lucky enough to get to help hire some of the first peers that they did hire. And I think it is a fabulous program. I realize it needs some fixes, but the fixes aren't harder than other fixes that we've done in our government to make things go farther. I I'm really a fan of, and somebody else said it, starting out with, can Portland Street Response show up? And then if it's too high of an acuity for that, then going to the next thing. But I also think that supporting the infrastructure of Portland Street Response is really important, not just the people that work there, obviously, but also their ability to give things out. And, you know, I don't know if we need to invest in tents that don't catch fire, but there's some really weird things going on. And I can talk about them because I'm not attached to anything. It just really seems like with PSR and fire that they're not being able to do their full mission and what they wanted to do. So I think it's really important that we support them in that way. And I also want people to realize that there's lots of mobile crisis stuff being developed, but there's way more sick people than there is crisis services being developed right now. Yeah, I'm just going to say it that way and leave it there. Thank you, everybody, for all your hard work on this. Actually, I do want to say something else. Hearing the city councilman saying that Portland Street Response can't go for the federal match. Why? Portland Street Response can't go for the federal match. Why? And then finally, we get, well, they're not running 24/7. Well, a lot of us want them to be running 24/7, and they were supposed to be running 24/7. And I would love to talk to the person from PSR about the data issue, because that's the other reason I'm being told that PSR can't get that federal money. And that also seems like it is a barrier that could be crossed. And if I'm the one that needs to jump in with the government people to get the right people in the room, I'll do it. So I'm interested. I sit on some other boards, the Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Council and the BHRC Advisory Council. So thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that comment. I just wanted to clarify, when you talk about data, are you talking about the demographic data capture requirements that are in place for billing? Yeah.
I believe I am, but
Yeah.
I haven't been told enough about it.
Fair enough. So much jargon. I just wanted to kind of add that in practice on the ground, we have not found that particular issue to be insurmountable. Just want to put that out there. This is the value of having a relational approach. We actually are able to overcome a lot of those barriers to get those demographic data points that are needed to fund and bill for reimbursement. Not all of the time, but certainly often. I just wanted to kind of put that out there.
Thank you.
And if I could add, so again, I was Governor Brown's Behavioral Health Policy Advisor, Jackie Irby, Friends of Portland Street Response. And so I got to work with people at the Oregon Health Authority. I got to work with members of Senator Wyden's staff and and Senator Wyden is passionate about mobile crisis. I mean, and there were times when I was in the governor's office where it felt embarrassing that like Governor Wyden was working really hard in Congress to get funding that we weren't tapping into. And there are times when I'm like, wait, do they work for us or do we work for them? And so Friends of Portland Street Response has met with Senator Wyden's staff. And I know they're really committed to trying to figure out how to support Portland Street Response and accessing this Medicaid money. I believe that the people at the Oregon Health Authority also want to figure out a pathway. And so, I'm really, it's unclear to me where the disconnect is. If there are people at different levels of government who want to see this happen. And I realize like getting Medicaid funding is not like, government does not make it easy. The federal government doesn't make it easy, right? So just want to be clear about that. So it may require some kind of new capacity within the city. But it's really like, I'll say curious to me that that the city is leaving this money on the table. You know.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. This person here was first. Is that okay? Okay, great. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charlie Michelle Wesley, and a former drug and alcohol counselor. I also a peer mentor, and my education and training is supporting people with mental health issues and addiction issues. I also go out and take meals to those unhoused out there. And I had picked up some supplies the other day and thought I'd cruise through Delta Park, because there's so many there in need. And I just have to say what we're seeing out there is a failure of our leadership, and that we're just seeing people whose needs are not being met. So even if we do go to someone in crisis, there's just not enough funding for beds, right? In addiction facilities, treatment facilities, and mental health facilities. But I stopped because there was a guy sitting in the middle of rubble, just trash and garbage, and he was covered with a tarp. And so I pulled over and wanted to see if I can, meet some of his needs. And he was pretty much incoherent, but I asked him his name, and they're not used to that. A spark came in his eye, like somebody really cared. And I introduced myself and I asked, what do you need? And he took everything I had: blanket, tent, tarp, beanies, gloves. And then he just, like he said, do you have something to eat? And normally I do, but I didn't that day. So I go, I'll be right back. I'm going to go get you something to eat. But we had a conversation and I let him know, I'm in recovery from addiction and mental health issues that kind of go hand in hand. And he goes, he was in tears. He goes, I just want to get my shit together. And I just told him, I have faith that you will when you're ready. And I came back and I had 2 types of pizzas. And I was like, you want pepperoni or Hawaiian? And he goes, can I have one of each? And I'm like, my bad. Of course you can, but nobody stops to talk to them and get to know them and ask them, what do they need? What do you want? What's working? What's not working? And, I've been there and nobody gave a fuck, right? It feels, this really scares me because I was also on the Police Accountability Commission, and we just put our heart, soul, and minds into that so the police would be accountable to community, and then they just gutted it. And I'm just baffled why it's so difficult for our community leaders to be humane, to meet people's needs. What the fuck is the problem here? So, yeah, we need you so bad, and we need you 24/7. Absolutely funded.
Thanks. Your response, Odelia.
Oh, we're just about at halfway through, so I just wanted to reread
the framing questions in case anything else comes up. So number one, what are the core attributes of Portland Street Response that make them something that has such a strong community support? In your view, what is needed to secure PSR's future as sustainable and a resilient program? Number three, currently Portland Street Response operates citywide from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. 7 days a week. Do you support maintaining this coverage? If you'd like to see it change, what would you like to see? Number four, currently, Portland Street Response can respond to mental health related situations that occur outside, meaning not in a building, and do not involve a weapon. Do you support maintaining these restrictions? If not, how would you like to see them change? Number five, Portland Street Response is a part of the city's broader response system. Describe what kind of relationship, if any, PSR should have with the following entities: the Portland Police Bureau, Portland Fire and Rescue, and Community Health Assess and Treat chat. Number six, where should Portland Street Response be administratively housed within the city? And number seven, are there specific changes you would not support being made to the operations or administration of Portland Street Response? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll continue with testimony, public testimony. We have no on virtual, so we'll keep going. We do? Okay, we'll take these two in person and then we'll go to virtual.
Hi, I have lived in Portland my whole life, and I have worked in social services for about 15 years in Portland. I've primarily served people who are without housing and survivors of domestic and sexual violence, stalking, elder abuse, child abuse, in various different positions. So I have a lot of experience working with police and in crisis situations, and I am just very grateful for Portland Street Response. I think the biggest thing I would say is that trust is certainly eroded with police, and our survivors and our community are very distrustful and scared of calling 911 for help, especially when it involves a loved one who's going through a crisis. They are very, very worried about that person's safety, and so sometimes just don't call for any help rather than calling the places that we have available. So I also just want to say that police continue to get money even as public trust in their services erodes, and we have poor outcomes from that service. And so it's really hard to understand why PSR would face any reductions in funding when providing quality services and just adding trust and good service to the community. So I would love to see Portland Street Response be more of a default when appropriate rather than something that people have to request. I would like to see it 24/7. I would like to see it continue citywide. And I think that, of course, I wouldn't want to ask for Portland Street Response staff to be going into any situations that they don't feel comfortable in, but I would certainly support expanding the ways that they can respond, whether that's inside or when certain weapons are involved. I would like to see there be a little more leniency depending on what they feel they're equipped to handle. I also really do not want Portland police being responsible for their budget or any decisions made about their policy or services. And I would like to see them have increased access to treatment and housing resources, and especially flex funding that could be used for needs that are coming up for the people that they're serving, and that maybe don't meet certain specific pots of money. So that's what I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joe Rowe. I'm a teacher in Portland Public Schools, and I want to start off, I'm looking at your shirt that says LCSW with the city logo on it. It makes me extremely happy to be here and hear everyone who spoke before me and look at the professionals up here, because when you see what our children go through in schools, they don't need police, they need social workers. And Portland Street Response should be responding to like 90% of the 911 calls by default. And that is a framing question. And the other framing question I think is helpful to speak to is that in my neighborhood where I've been 12 years, we have a neighbor, he was a teenager, and he has several diagnosed diseases, mental health diseases that his dad has told us about. And the neighbors no longer call 911 because it is common knowledge in the city that if you call 911 a family member, it's a good potential they'll be shot, and that's well documented, and or something else that doesn't involve them being shot. So when I called 911 once because things got bad, street response couldn't come because I was in the wrong neighborhood. The pilot wasn't in North Portland. And they couldn't come because of the time of the day, because he often has his breakdowns at 3 a.m. And they couldn't come because some of the words he was using, like he's bipolar and he has a lot of words that he uses. And because of the things he was saying, the 911 operator said, you know, street response couldn't come, even if you were in the right neighborhood, even if it was 3 p.m., not 3 a.m. So to the framing questions, it should all be expanded, all of it. Everything should be expanded. And I think we need more events like this where the public, instead of getting on Nextdoor and ranting, sees empathy in each other. And I also think we had some very good norms of communication about what not to say. And in those norms, I didn't hear things that you couldn't say things like, I'm Joe and I volunteered 4 years. I volunteered twice for Joanne Hardesty to get her in office because she and other visionaries made things like PSR happen. So I'm not violating a norm by saying Joanne is certainly a hero, but everyone who volunteers for Joanne and everyone in this room is a hero. And we need to be heroes again because the current city council is killing Portland street response. And it may die on the table, but I feel like the new city council will resuscitate it. So I think we need to speak outside of just this machinery of our systems and say we all have to be door knockers because candidates, they need money, they need door knockers, they need phone bankers. And I'm not breaking norms by saying that, but that is the reality that will keep Portland street response alive. So thank you.
Thank you. And we have a Jim Lab who wants to make a comment or testimony. What is that, Jim?
Yeah, is it Jim Love or wants to make a comment?
Hi, good evening. I'm Jim Labby. I'm North Portland resident, and I'm also a co-director at Participatory Budgeting Oregon. I wanted to just echo the praise for the Portland Street Response and the hard work on the streets that you are doing for the city and the future of our city. To answer the first question, I guess, to speak to the first question about what PSR needs, I think one way of answering this is we really do need leadership on the city council that will fully fund and expand the program over time. I'm a little concerned that the current but temporary budget situation in the city is going to lead to the kind of an austerity discussion that's going to pit popular programs against each other, like Portland's street response. As the representative from, I think it was from, was it Street Roots or no, it was from Sisters of the Road, was talking about the abundance that is in the budget if we look comprehensively in areas that are very well resourced and I think over-resourced. Long term, I think the solution is we need to really democratize the budgeting process itself so that Portlanders have greater voice and vote in making these decisions. Because budgets are one of the primary ways governments exercise power. But access to that power is very uneven. And I think it shouldn't be such a struggle to fund this program. And it wouldn't be such a struggle if we had more participatory forms of budgeting. We are offering one solution that we hope to take to the voters this November is actually to finally bring participatory budgeting to Portland. I would say it's not the only, it shouldn't be relied on to fund things like Portland Street Response, that should be funded by the city council, but it's another tool for us to bring greater transparency, accountability, and equity over these budget decisions over time. And if anyone would like to sign our petition, I'll be here afterwards tonight. Thank you.
All right. I want to thank everyone for the comments. We're definitely still doing comments. I just want to remind folks that there are some folks who want to speak again. We're still prioritizing those who have not spoken, and then we will get to those who are virtually, your hands are raised, and those in person who maybe want to speak a second time. So yes, go right ahead.
Hello, my name is Tara Hirschberger. I am also a teacher here in Portland. And something that is really important to me as an educator is to be trauma informed, meaning that I assume that any child I interact with, any adult, any person that I interact with has some traumas in their background and may have unmet needs. And that bad behavior or acting out is usually a result of a need not being met or feeling unsafe because of a trauma that has been activated. And so I think about applying that in terms of Portland Street Response. And I fully support funding and expanding Portland Street Response. And just think about how any child, any adult, any person with mental health issues, really anyone, absolutely everyone deserves to have support and not punishment, especially in those moments that are just really bad. I can speak for myself, and I'm sure all of us have had really terrible moments. And what we need in those moments is just to be seen, to be talked to be comforted, not to have a weaponized militant police officer responding to that moment of crisis. So I support the fully funding of Portland Street Response. And if that money is not there in the budget, then we need to reallocate from some other forms of funding. Like we need to take money from the Portland Police and phase it into the Portland Street Response because we need more of that sort of crisis response. I also support the program expanding to 24 hours, expanding its reach all over the city, and also for it to be independent from the police and fire departments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is John. A couple of things. I don't want to repeat what pretty much everybody has said. But of course, 24/7, I would like to see it be countywide. I don't know how to do that if it was under the city's control, obviously independent. A few things that may already occur, but that I would like to see, it's been mentioned, is mental health peers being in somewhat of like an advisor role, but then also like substance misuse or addiction peers, since there's so much overlap and there's so many people that struggle with mental health stuff that also have co-occurring that struggle with addiction. And I know that a lot of times the general public can't tell the difference between somebody that's having meth-induced psychosis and somebody that's struggling with mental illness. Somebody that has lived experience like me, off 99% of the times I can tell the difference. So that's helpful. I think the thing that either hasn't been mentioned or has only been mentioned by one person is, and it kind of ties in with this idea that was mentioned by one of the previous speakers around our budget, about democratizing the budget process. More so, is what's frustrating is that we see year after year, we will run into these situations where 90+% of the population goes to the city and they testify on one side, and then the city will vote the opposite. And that very much shows that the city has already made their decision and they don't care what the people say. And that happens with the budget, and that happens specifically with the police budget. It happens with the police union contract all the time. And so I wanted to focus on the police union. There's somebody that spoke previously about how a majority of the police that they interact with don't say that they don't want to be interacting with people in crisis. But what we see is that the police union continues to have things in their contract that that gives them more power. They don't want to let go of any power. They don't want to let go of any money. They don't want to give any power to any other agency if it's going to take their duties away or their control. And so having more say in the police union contract and getting rid of the things in the police union contract that prevent PSR from doing more work. I guess the one other thing is around, of course, being PSR should be able to go inside. The weapons thing, I don't know what the current policy specifically is, but my suggestion would be that we make a differentiation between somebody that's possessing a weapon or maybe like had some issue around a weapon and then people that are currently menacing or brandishing weapons. I feel like those are kind of two different things because a lot of times people on the streets, they have to carry weapons. Like it's just so dangerous. So like just the fact that they have a weapon is not a reason to send police in. So
Thank you.
that's it.
Hi, my name is Leo Rhodes, and I'm a homeless advocate. I've been homeless off and on 30 years. I'm in housing now. But one of the things I do support this, having Portland response. But one of the things is I wish when I was on the streets, we had this. There's a lot of times, yeah, I would have been considered mentally ill. And it's not that I'm mentally ill, it's just that I'm fed up with all of this bullshit that goes on with the city, the S and M kind of thing that goes on with the city, with the public of all homeless people are bad. All homeless people are drunks or druggies, criminals, all of this mentally ill. There's a lot of things I want to say. That's why it took a long time. But supporting this is great. I wish a lot of homeless people were here to see this and hear this, but a lot of them are just giving on up. If you don't have this, that's what's going on. They're dying mentally and physically. They're dying out there right now because they don't have that support. It should be 24/7 because homelessness isn't between 8 o'clock in the evening until 6 o'clock in the morning. Or on the daytime, I'm sorry. But, that's one of the things. It should be strong out there. And I kind of think this is ludicrous to do this because it should be a given. We shouldn't have to be fighting for this kind of stuff. This is ridiculous to come in and say, oh, well, we're going to cut this on off and support or not support you guys on outside. Housing first. Now that is kind of a long-term goal. And my thing is about shelters in 10 cities right now. What are we going to do? You read my shirt, what it says, that's what I support. Everybody should have the rights, all these rights out on the streets. But yet we have to fight all the time. People, again, like I said, you can be physically strong, mentally strong out on the streets, but you will break down. And that's what's happening right now, especially with this work. The response, if it's not there, yeah, they're going to give on up. And it's going to be a lot worse than it is right now. And that's what you don't want. You don't want that to happen. You want to help support these individuals out there, help them. And then when you talk about the infrastructure, you need a base. Right now, I don't think you have that base right now. You need a base, a strong base, and then you can build on top of that. When you start doing that, I'm going to come back and I'll talk to you guys about it, what we really need. So thank you.
All right. So at this time, we're going to go ahead and, oh, yes.
Hi again, Jackie Yerby, Friends of Portland Street Response. Totally appreciate the last comment. And I should say, I am not, I'm not out on like going on calls on Portland Street Response. I do see them responding to calls occasionally, and I want to be like, hey, great job. But, you know, they're busy. So I'm gonna leave them alone, let them do their due. And I do follow like a lot of comments that people are making about Portland Street Response. And a concern that I have, and I've not consulted with Lila, but a concern that I have is that people are looking at Portland Street Response to fix houselessness. To fix, like, you're shaking your head, but I'm just like a lot of comments that I've seen over the past few months is like, we do have a houseless crisis. We do have an overdose crisis. And there are times when I see this, it feels like there's this expectation that Portland Street Response is supposed to fix it. And the fact that it isn't fixed is somehow like blamed on Portland Street Response. Again, I've not consulted with Lila at all. This is like my perspective based on like what I don't think is very well-informed comments. And I think it's really important to manage expectations about the amazing work that Portland Street Response is doing. And they work with houseless people and they work with housed people. And it's a really important part of the I'd say insufficient continuum that we have to address our housing crisis and our mental health crisis. But it's one piece of many, many, many pieces that need to be in place. And so I just don't want to be like, hey, Portland Street Response, can you fix what's happening on our streets? I just felt that was really important to say.
I feel like we did talk about that last time we spoke, because it's a serious thing. You know, and I'm really here to talk about like technical aspects of the program, like boots on the ground stuff, because that's really what I do in my role, managing that piece. But you know, it bears taking a pause and really like mulling it over how a lot of this discordance, this sort of conflict, this disagreement that is like, it doesn't make sense to anyone sitting in this room. It doesn't make sense to my responders. It doesn't make sense to the folks that we serve. There are very contested understandings of about what makes people unwell, what leads to these outcomes that we are seeing folks suffering in so many compounding and layered ways. So, you know, but I think from my vantage point, managing these teams and prioritizing the service, it's really important that folks aren't made to wait while we figure this out. So I will add that. Yes, we did talk about it.
Okay. Well, we didn't talk about it right before.
Yeah, thank you for addressing that and saying those things. So we have a couple more comments here that we'll go virtually, but then also just know that this is the last call for comments. So if you wanted to make a statement virtually, please make sure you raise your hand, and in person, please join us in the queue. But we'll go ahead and go to Kat.
Hi, thanks again. So, you know, we talked about the budget. John brought up some things about the contract. I had put something in the comments of Zoom, but I'm realizing obviously that's a discourse all of its own. One of the things to help stabilize Portland Street Response would be looking at the Portland Police Association's contracts that talk about first responders. Back a couple of years ago, PPA raised that the PSR would respond to calls where police and fire historically responded, and that could trample or step on their toes via labor laws, and that after a union group had done certain work for years. So then that falls under collective bargaining. The collective bargaining agreement keeps a ceiling over Portland Street Response. If we want to expand, if we want to stabilize, if we want to ensure there's a future here, we also have to look at the contracts, not just the budget. The budget is very important because I believe it was Joanne Hardesty one time in City Council who said, show me your budget, I'll show you your priorities, and that it's a living, breathing document. A budget shows where a city's moral compass is pointing. So we need both to happen at the same time. We have to look at the things that are keeping PSR down and work on all of them at once. And that's a heavy lift, but that's the only way this program is going to expand and survive.
Right. Thank you, Kat. We have a couple new commenters in person, so we're going to go ahead and prioritize them, and then we'll jump back to virtual.
Hello, my name is Meg and I'm a Portland resident. And more importantly, or I guess more relevantly, I've got a pretty extensive background in working in insurance and Medicaid. And really my only comment is like looking or hearing the explanations of why Medicaid isn't being utilized. It truly doesn't sound like accurate. I mean, I don't know of any sort of medical service who has discussed using Medicaid funds and not discussed collecting demographic information. That's how you bill insurance. It takes, I guess, a high degree of inference to assume that there was a discussion of Medicaid and no one thought you might need to collect that information. It's not hard. It's actually like mandatory. Like any sort of utilization of Medicaid is going to require it. So having PSR do it is the most rational thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Yep. Go ahead.
Hey everyone, my name is Spencer Trum and I'm a community organizer. I live in inner southeast Portland. I've been a community organizer for 5 years and I've lived in Portland for about 13 and a half and I've seen a lot. I want to reiterate what some folks have been saying about how we need to make sure that Portland Street Response is able to enter indoors when situations call for it. In fact, I think they should be proactively forming relationships with business owners and neighbors at the forefront of situations where Portland Street Response services are most needed. As an organizer, I can tell you firsthand that when you're facing adversity, it's relationships that make the real difference. And we don't just need them inside and outside, but 24/7, because any crisis worth addressing is even more worth addressing at 3 o'clock in the morning. Am I right? Folks, there's been a multi-year, highly organized campaign to blame poor and vulnerable people for every last thing that goes wrong in Portland. The credulous reporting by some of our local news media doesn't help, and the bile spewed by comment section dwellers and local social media influencers borders on incitement. I think we're better than that, but we got to prove it. I want you all to think back to 2020. We helped each other a lot that year, and whether you were marching for justice in the streets or gathering groceries for elders, at a grocery store, or working on the front lines in healthcare, or just staying home when you were sick or things were just too hot with COVID, you were looking out for your neighbors. That's the Portland that showed the world its very best. So now we're at a decision point. Are we going to follow our data, our hearts, and just good common sense to support poor and sick and vulnerable people, our neighbors, by giving Portland Street Response the funding and stability it needs to serve them? Or are we going to give in to the compassion fatigue and the bullies and snobs who benefit from that? It's time to make a choice, so make me proud, Portland.
All right, we're going to turn virtual. Steph?
Hello, team. My name is Steph Routh, she, they, and I want to appreciate everyone for being part of this conversation this evening, and to Jackie's earlier comments regarding Medicaid. That is new information for me, so I'm appreciative for that. I'm a Lents resident. We were the pilot neighborhood for Portland Street Response, and when we learned this past summer that Portland Street Response was going through some difficulty in terms of funding and going to 24/7, as was decided on, that was where we wanted to go, and we do, and I do, to go to 24/7 coverage. I went to a couple of community events in Lents with the initial petition from Friends of PSR, and the conversations just want to report back, had an overwhelming number of conversations with my fellow Lentals that they were, I'm saying they didn't understand why it would be that funding would be imperiled, and had strong feelings that it was positive for the neighborhood and wished it to be expanded. So wanted to share that from Lentz neighborhood. Also, I had just a conversation earlier this week that stuck with me, the difference between reaction and response. And I think in the last few years, we've definitely been in a reactive state. And I think the fact that PSR's name includes the word response, the difference is intentionality and a holistic look at what is the need and what is the response required in a specific situation. I also heard leadership from Lentz Fire Station 11 say that, PSR is a part of an expanded toolkit for community safety, and that really resonated with me. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Steph. Byron?
Thank you, Frida. I guess this is more pertaining question towards Layla and Elizabeth and Jackie. Could you elaborate on thinking of PSR when it started? It was kind of like they would sit down with the people who are homeless if they came across somebody and sit there if they could, theoretically speaking, for a few hours to get to know this person and then try to build a relationship and bring them back to the same spot later on. And that in due time, it would draw the homeless people who are needing these services. It could draw the people out that didn't want to go to a shelter or didn't want to be put into a camping place or something like. Could you ladies elaborate on? Am I going in the right direction with that? And just to have that on record.
I'm not entirely clear on the question, but I can comment on what I think I heard. And I guess what I'll say is this. Everybody is very, very curious about the perfect formula for incident resolution for these calls. And I guess we are too. But the fact is that humans are complicated when they're like having a great day. And when they're in crisis, it's infinitely more complicated. So that said, we do tend to structure our responses. We want to approach and engage, try to de-escalate. And often we do so through the distribution of some basic needs supplies. And we work with the folks to, see what, like we've heard so many comments, just talking about the value of this. We get curious about what they want, what they need, what their experiences are, to really find and work together on a plan towards restoration. And sometimes that includes service connection, warm handoffs to partner orgs, whatever it might look like. It's individualized. And then we, part of our model is also following up with the individual to make sure that they are able to maintain stability in the community. So that's like the basic framework of what PSR first response and the aftercare piece really is. Byron, I don't know if that answers your questions. I could definitely say a little bit more about that.
No, that was fine because what I'm trying to bring out is that PSR, from a moral stance, we can bring people out that's not ready yet. PSR was somebody that would sit down and get to know this person, to build a relationship with him as much as they could. We understand all the other things that are going on inside and outside the job. That goes without saying.
Yeah.
Yet from your working standpoint and why you're here and why you do this is to draw out the people who don't want to go to shelters, who are not ready to go into tents, or who love tents, or but are scared to ask for anything or don't have any trust. And PSR is that conduit to these people. And say if you drive and you hang out somewhere on 57th and whatever, and you know, you could draw a few people from in there, and then you move on to not to the point where you draw so many where they start hanging around and then start bothering the neighbors and things of that type of thing. So that's what my whole piece is about. And I just wanted you guys to elaborate more on, you know, PSR and, you know, and not necessarily this budget fight that we're hearing.
Yeah, I apologize to the facilitators here. I know that I'm not supposed to delve into a back and forth exactly, but I just really appreciate the question and the curiosity, Byron. You know, there's so much in there and in our approach that really is worth taking a moment just to kind of like unpack it a little bit. And you know, as much as it's kind of insufferable to answer a question with a question, I have to just pose it to everyone who's in attendance, who's here or virtual. What does it feel like to be treated like you're a problem? What does that feel like? Does that actually like point you in any discernible fashion in the direction of your own recovery? Actually, no, yeah. So, you know, the value of having this multidisciplinary team, a peer integrated multidisciplinary team, that is able to be present with a human in a dignified and compassionate, trauma-informed way, cannot be overstated. So that's the one piece that I just really wanted to take a moment to sort of share about. And the other thing is, you know, lots of folks have an understanding or a picture in their head about like what a successful resolution is. And definitely that involves, you know, getting someone to shelter. And I just wanted to take a moment to uplift, you know, I did engage my my staff just ahead of this event, even though I started as a responder and have that boots on the ground experience myself. I really value their experiences and perspectives and wanted to make sure that I was able to represent them faithfully here tonight. And they felt it was very important to really highlight and uplift the fact that there are many barriers to folks being willing to really go to a congregate shelter setting. I mean, for folks who have serious mental illness, for folks who are experiencing extreme states, perhaps they are, you know, experiencing internal stim, you know, they're having, you know, psychotic experiences or have trauma. You know, these congregate shelter settings, you know, there are lots of barriers in place to folks wanting to actually select into those resources. And I just kind of wanted to flag that, you know, it's really important as we engage in this conversation to get really curious about the human and what it really takes to meet folks where they're at, what that means. It doesn't mean a neat, tidy incident resolution today, right now. It may not. And to the extent that we want to bring folks who are on the margins in with us, we need to take the time. That's why we take the time on scene.
All right, we have public comment.
Bridge Crane again. And I actually kind of like where this has gone in the last few minutes because what do I love more than Portland Street Response? I love successful outcomes. Portland Street Response is just a tool to help a person in crisis on a path to wellness, which is a hell of a difficult struggle the way we do things in Multnomah County. Because the phrasing that was just used, there's an incident that Portland Street Response responds to. Of course, they're holistic and peer integrated, so they're also responding to a person. But while we're fighting to use the best tool and keep that tool, Portland Street Response, fully funded and growing so that less people die, we also have to listen to the Portland Street Response teams talk about where the roughest edges are about handoffs and service integrations. And I think there was a little talk about demographics and data. I hope there'll be more public involvement so we know more things about how often do we think of Portland Street Response as a resolution that doesn't involve going to Unity versus one that does. Having left Unity more than once in my life, the handoffs have been okay, and that there usually was not a justice system adjacent outcome. But if we don't grow, not just say, but grow Portland Street Response, we're going to pay for it in other places. And it's maybe even appropriate to speak of that in a threatening manner, because we know that in addition to not having a very hard time funding Portland Street Response, Oregon has a very hard time funding public defender services. And if we want people to adopt non-harmful behaviors, we have to invest in positive interventions like Portland Street Response. And we also need to fund public defenders so that people who do get caught up in justice system adjacent cases can have the access to a rich resource. And we also need to get away from a place where there's a different palette or menu of what's available to criminalized people and non-criminalized people. We just need to work towards wellness with a fully funded street response and a plan to grow the capacity for Portland Street Response. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you. So much deep appreciation to all the comments tonight. That was our final public comment. At this time, we're going to turn to the panelists and see if anyone has any final comments.
I'll just quickly say thank you so much to everyone who showed up tonight, whether it was online, whether it was in this room, for everyone who raised their voice, who made their position known in this public space, and with all of these people who I think are truly invested in trying to find solutions that serve the community. So thank you so much for everything. I don't get to be a decision maker. I'm not an elected official, but I can promise you that I will be one of the voices in the room any chance I get that is always trying to raise up the work that Portland Street Response does, and working with these teams to bring success in whatever way I can. But thank you all for your feedback and for your input. It matters deeply.
I'll just echo Stephanie in thanking everybody for the time and the thought you put into your comments today, especially for some of you who shared your personal experiences. I really, really appreciate everything that you guys have brought to us. I look forward to the PSEP recommendations. I know that all the PSEP members were listening as well, and they'll form those into recommendations that the city will then need to respond to. So that's great. A couple of the things that I heard is just making sure that Portland Street Response is fully funded, is 24/7. It's not an extensive list of everything that we heard tonight, but definitely heard the need to expand, right? And to make sure that it is fully funded. And the other thing I want to emphasize that I heard is the need to have trust with the community and public safety. I think it's really important as we move forward, as we become the public safety service area in whatever form that is, it's making sure that every Portlander feels safe. And that means something different to every person, right? And so I just wanted to let you know we are committed to that. And yeah, thank you.
Just echoing in the thanks. Thank you very much. Super thoughtful comments. It's really life-giving. I feel like so many of us, especially, public service or whatever you do, so often we're just staring into like the problems of our society, of our everything, right? Everything's a grind and a slog for so many of us. Things are hard. And where do we have an opportunity to lean into vision? Where do we have an opportunity to lean into hope and something different? anything to disrupt the spiral of doom. So thank you for the seat at the table. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for dreaming of this alongside with us. Thanks.
And I'll add my thanks. Thank you, PSEP, for having us and doing this. I've participated in a lot of public processes, and I think this is by far the most kind of open and unfiltered one that I've participated in. And there have been times when we're like, wow, you're letting us do that. So thank you. And thank you, community members. Thank you to the 12,000 people who've signed the Friends of Portland Street Response petition. Like I said, we're going to be involved in the public hearings. We're going to keep the pressure on this council, as well as working with people who are running for council to make sure that they're on board with ensuring that Portland Street Response is fully funded, fully resourced, and that we are getting out of their way in letting them do the important, incredibly valuable work that they're doing. And so finally, I want to say, like, thank you to Portland Street Response. It is hard work. Yeah, and the people that I've met, the people that I've heard of, like, want to be in these spaces, right? It is, yeah. And so I just really want to honor and support and do everything I can and hope that you'll join again with us at Friends of Portland Street Response to make sure that these people who are showing up for our most vulnerable are getting the support and resources that they need to do their jobs, and they're not having to stress about like all the noise that's been out there for far too long.
Thank you, panelists. And thanks everyone for your public testimony. We're going to pass it over to Ashley, the co-chair of PSEP, to share what's next.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. All right. Well, yes, thank you to everyone who was here, all our panelists, all the PSEP members who were there tonight, and the staff who helped put together this great event. I'm again really bummed I couldn't be there in person, but I was able to get away for some spring break fun with my family. And so, yeah, next step. So as you all know, we've mentioned a couple times, the purpose of this event was to hear community input that will inform a recommendation that we will be sending to the mayor's office. And the aim is to get that before they do any budget decision making. So we'll be working on that shortly here, and there'll be opportunities for you to listen in on the recommendation before we send it to the mayor's office. And so we'll keep you informed on that. One way to do that, I would suggest signing up for PSEP, subscribe to PSEP's emails. This is when you'll get updates about any events and ways to stay connected. And we've also heard this too tonight that while PSEP is excited to take the input we heard tonight and inform a comprehensive and maybe more detailed recommendation to send to the mayor, the community still needs to show up within the budget process. So yes, making sure you make it to the listening community sessions that the city has put together in the month of April. It also suggests, I just put the link in the chat as well, to subscribe to city and council agendas, so that as we get to May, we will, you can keep up to date on when to join a council meeting to provide more testimony. And yeah, we are, as we also noted earlier, we are looking for more PSEP members, Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing. We've got some really great goals this year, one of them being a codification of PSEP, so that if there is a life outside the settlement agreement, PSEP will still be a valuable and cemented piece to community input on policing in the city. So please, if you can take this QR code, apply. And I know there was just a listening session for PSEP, so we can send out more information for any other future opportunities like that. And then other ways to stay involved with PSEP. Always you can email us with any suggestions. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter if you'd like. That's another way to find out about upcoming events. And yes, again, thank you to everyone who was able to make it today. We've had this forum before, so PSEP is excited to bring forward a recommendation that has all the community input that you all provided today.
All right. Thank you again, everyone. Appreciate everyone who was able to make it here in person, everybody who was able to join us virtually, all of our panelists, of course, our PSEP members, facilitators, AV support. Also, we want to just remind folks that if you did not have the opportunity to make a comment, that you can still make a comment. You can submit your comment through our PSEP email address at psepinfo@portlandoregon.gov. That's still an opportunity. There are comment cards that are still outside on the main entrance. If you would like to have a written comment and submit that. Again, one last plug, PSEP is seeking new members. So please, if it tickles your fancy or heightens your interest, check it out. We're definitely interested in adding new members. Again, thank you again for such a very heart-centered and important meeting tonight. This meeting is adjourned.